What's up guys, new production value Nathan here. Not all of us can be god gamers or full-time streamers, but we sure as hell can supply them. What I'm referring to is the fact that farming 5 army legion encounters is one of the most profitable things you can do in Path of Exile right now. The problem with this is the barrier for entry is so damn high that unless you have a friend playing support, a god tier speed clearing build that also deals millions of Shaper DPS, and a headhunter, you're probably not going to clear these as efficiently as you need to make significant profit. And that's where we come in. For all the people running 5 army encounters, there needs to be people to farm splinters, to generate emblems, to produce more and more of these encounters for the people who want to farm them. And that's where the new stat, monoliths per hour, has come from. It's the idea of loading into a map like Glacier or Dunes, rushing over to the monolith, clearing every single shell, and then clearing every single mob as quickly as possible, hopefully getting a map back, and then porting out and doing it again 100 times an hour. I'm going to be linking to an awesome content creator called Grimro in the description below because he's done a ton of these. He's compared Magic Find to no Magic Find, from red maps to white maps, just all of the information you need to make decisions about how you want to go about monolith farming. However, what he doesn't talk about are some of the best builds that are very effective for monolith farming, which is the purpose of today's video. The builds that I'll be talking about today are basically tier 1 or tier 2 monolith farmers that will get you into your glacier, break every single shell in the monolith, and then clear every single mob with relative ease. So if you're interested in taking part in this monolith farming craze, then you've come to the right video. So without further ado, let's take a look at the builds. So the first build I have for you today should surprise absolutely nobody, and that is Tornado Shot. Tornado Shot has been a powerful skill for as long as I can remember, and has always been very clear speed oriented, which means it jives extremely well with how you need to break out monsters in the Legion Monolith encounters. In the background, you can see this is actually my Tornado Shot character I was dabbling with. As you can see, it's not a meta version at all. It's using Champion, it's going Impale, it's got Bleed Explosions. Nothing about this character screams ultra optimized Tornado Shot for monolith farming, but as you can see, it still clears these monoliths scarily well. If you wanted to roll a character, a Tornado Shot character for monolith farming, I would highly recommend Deadeye because you get Tailwind for ultra fast movement speed and you get +1 chain, which lets you get these crazy clears without having to run chain support like in my janky build. Another thing to know about Tornado Shot is a lot of people instantly sort of associate it with Magic Find, Wind Ripper, Venter's Gamble stuff, and actually the way it works out, I'll let you go watch Grimro's videos for more details, is you don't actually need to run Magic Find. So if you want to just equip your best clear speed, damage, movement speed type gear and just run through these monoliths as quickly as possible, there's no reason to turn around and invest in Magic Find unless you really want to do that or you're engaging in party play. The downside to Tornado Shot is it is one of the more expensive builds to get started compared to some of the other ones on this list. To really get a good feeling Tornado Shot character, you're going to need a Dying Sun, you're going to need a Queen of the Forest to move fast, you're going to need a decent bow to deal some damage, and sadly you're going to need that Tornado Shot Helm enchant, which is several exalts, even if you're getting the absolute worst base possible. That being said, once you do get that investment rolling, I would argue that Tornado Shot is probably the very best low-tier Legion monolith farmer in the game. It just costs a little more to get started. So if you like bow builds, if you like going fast, if you like playing the game as efficiently as possible, check out Tornado Shot Deadeye. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. The next build I have for you today is good old Essence Drain Contagion. Now, I'm not going to dwell on this one too long because I actually made a full-fledged build guide last week, but suffice to say, there's a reason why everybody was talking about this skill right before Legion launched, and why people are still talking about this skill as one of the best Legion monolith farmers in the game. Basically, long story short, you press 2 buttons and the entire encounter gets cleared. All you need to do is invest a little bit in your damage by getting a level 21 gem, and then invest a little bit in your AoE by running Contagion, Increased Area of Effect, Intensify, and then using something like a Zeal's Amplifier or a Carcass Jack. Put all of this together and you have a relatively low investment Legion farmer that can clear the encounters very consistently and easily without too much mechanical skill required. The main drawback of this build is it doesn't scale quite as well as some of the other builds on this list. It's not horrible by any means, like if you're just running Glaciers, you will absolutely not notice any problems at all, but if you do decide to move up and farm some red maps, tier 16 maps, you're going to need to invest in a Socketed Gems bow, and that's going to make things a little bit more expensive compared to some of the other builds on this list. Again, I'm not going to dwell on Essence Drain. If you want to learn more, watch last week's guide, but suffice to say, this is one of the best low-level monolith farmers in the game. Next up, we actually have a Vaal skill, and that's Vaal Ice Nova. I'm going to play a couple of clips in the background, but I'm sure you guys have seen some of them. It basically is hitting that Legion monolith, pressing Vaal Ice Nova, and watching these sort of like bloom cascading Nova things hit every single monster in the encounter. The strong thing about Vaal Ice Nova is it is actually relatively versatile. You can play it as a cast on Frostbolt Mathel style Ice Nova character. You can try to play it as a cast on crit assassin character. You can even sort of just stick it into a random 6-link if you have a free 6-link after using a staff or bow kind of build. Another upside of this build is that it actually scales relatively well. It has good base crit, it has nice added damage effectiveness, and you can just dump some currency into this build and it will perform just as well in tier 16 maps as it would in tier 1 maps. Another good aspect of this skill is it's extremely flexible in your ascendancy choice. So if you want to play an Inquisitor, you want to play a Trickster, you want to play an Assassin, you want to play a Scion, you want to play an Elementalist for some reason, you can really make it work. All you really need to do is just get Ice Nova, get some crit, get some added cold damage, and bam, you're going to be doing a ton of damage, and you're going to be clearing the shit out of white maps, yellow maps, and eventually red maps with a little investment. The one downside of this build is one of the most fun ways to play Ice Nova, in my opinion, is a cast on crit Cyclone Assassin, and the way the damage scales is you're not going to get quite enough damage to full clear those monoliths as you get into the higher tier maps. You can still clear them the old-fashioned way by cycloning around and just blowing them up, but you're not going to be able to just one tap right from the middle and one shot everything because the links for Vaal Ice Nova don't quite line up the same way if you're playing a cast on crit character. Anyway, Vaal Ice Nova, super satisfying, super fun. If you like the whole Ice Nova, Frostbolt, Mathel interaction thing, then go for it because it's really strong. The damage is insane and the clear is muy bueno. Next up is an option that I wanted to include just because it's a little bit different, and I know some people like to play the game outside of the box, so to speak, and that is the Touch of Anguish, Frostblades, Raider, Zerker, Champion, whatever ascendancy you want. Basically, if you never played it, Frostblades is a skill where you just sort of attack once and then it shoots a bunch of blades out of the back of the enemy, and if you use Touch of Anguish, that causes all of those blades to chain if you're at maximum frenzy charges. Now, I shouldn't have to explain this too in depth, but because of how tightly clustered all of the Legion Monolith mobs are, all you have to do is do that once or twice and you'll be clearing just massive like 1/8 and 1/4 of the section just per attack. It's really satisfying, it's pretty cool and fun if you like Frostblades, and most importantly, it's different. You know, it's basically a melee skill, which is cool because there's not a lot of melee skills that clear these monoliths super well. It's pure cold, it's got good pen. It's just a little bit different. You can also play it as a Raider if you like getting 200% movement speed from a goddamn Ascendancy. The only thing that's a little dicey about this build is if you're using Touch of Anguish, your damage is not going to scale ultra high, so you're probably going to be stuck on those yellow and white maps, which you probably should be farming anyway. But the way you do it is you just sort of walk around the middle of the circle of the monolith and you just sort of attack left and right. If you're moving fast enough, it shouldn't be too difficult with a little bit of practice. I just wouldn't say it's as brain dead as some of the other builds on the list. So if you like Frostblades, if you like melee, you're probably already playing this build, but if you're looking for something new and you always wanted to try out Frostblades, this is definitely the league to do so. Next up, we have Toxic Rain. Now, I'm sorry I feel like a broken record because I've talked about this skill for my league starter list like for the past half a year or something by now, but it's for good reason. Toxic Rain, especially on Pathfinder, is a skill that has fantastic AoE coverage, very decent damage, and then a cool extra defensive layer that most skills don't have in the form of this like slow type thing that isn't affected by modifiers like cold resistance or anything like that. It just slows. I mean, that's a fantastic defensive layer. If you're playing hardcore and you're looking for a Legion Monolith farm and you don't want the mobs to be able to catch up to you, Toxic Rain, why not? One comparison I think some people might make here is Toxic Rain versus Rain of Arrows. I think Rain of Arrows is also a fantastic monolith farmer, but the downside of Rain of Arrows is it just requires a little bit more currency to get up and running. And if you're just going to be sticking to white maps, I don't see why you'd want to invest more, stack Abyss Jewels, get like a nice like Shroud of the Lightless or something. I don't know why you would do any of that when you can just settle for Toxic Rain, which is going to deal absolutely comparable, if not more damage at those lower levels with lower investment. Another thing to note about Toxic Rain is it's not quite as brain dead as some of the other skills. I'd say it's probably a little bit easier than Frostblades, but definitely a lot harder than something like Essence Drain Contagion. You still have to walk the perimeter of the circle just firing up your arrows, but they'll land, they'll cover a huge area, especially with the Pathfinder AoE talent, or no, sorry, wrong game there. You'll be doing just fine. It'll be comfortable, it's a slightly off meta bow skill, and it's a lot of fun. So if you haven't played Toxic Rain yet and you're looking for an excuse to do so, this is a fantastic way to get into monolith farming for just as low of a budget as something like Essence Drain. Next up, we have the most popular skill in the game right now, and that is Cyclone. Cyclone is undeniably so strong right now because of all the added damage it gets just for leveling up. It's free attack speed, it's free radius, it being channeling, everything about it having a million tags to scale and a million ways to deal damage with it. But as far as a Monolith farmer, some people might think it's underwhelming. Well, I'm here to tell you the exact opposite. There's actually two things you really need to focus on with Cyclone if you want to be a good Monolith farmer. You need speed and area of effect. I think a lot of people that are playing Cyclone right now actually haven't played much with the skill in the past, so it's really easy to sort of just drop stuff into Path of Building and start oogling at your damage numbers, but at the end of the day, it's actually much stronger if you just focus on some movement speed and some AoE so you can get a really nice, comfortable clearing. And then if you're farming these low tier maps like Glacier, for example, I've mentioned a million times, I won't stop, you really don't need that much damage. As long as you can pump up your Path of Building Shaper DPS to something like 200, 300k, you can definitely get away with less. You're going to be able to clear those monoliths one-shotting every single mob without even having to think about it. So if we're making a Cyclone for monolith farming, we need to focus on movement speed and AoE, just like I said. To do that, you're going to have to pick an ascendancy choice that really jives with both of these choices. Of course, the most obvious brain-dead choice here is Slayer, and I think Slayer is still fantastic. I'm not ragging on it. There's nothing wrong with playing one of the best ascendancies in the game. It just gives you everything you need. You get that 20% movement speed from Bane of Legends, you get the insane AoE and weapon range from Impact, and then everything else, as far as monolith farming is concerned, is just sort of icing on the cake. The second ascendancy choice I would recommend is actually Deadeye. Now, Deadeye doesn't get as much AoE as Slayer, but it still gets a generic 50% multiplier, which is, not as good as Impact, but it's still pretty fantastic. And then you also get Tailwind, which, as you guys know, is a more multiplier to all of your action speed. So what you lose in AoE, you make up for in moving around and casting and hacking so much faster and so much smoother than Slayer would. The other two ascendancy choices that I would say are more or less viable would probably be Gladiator and Raider. Gladiator is really good now because they just changed Legion mobs to actually work with on-kill effects, so hopefully that means bleed explosions. And then you also get that more movement speed modifier. So I'd say it's kind of like Deadeye, but without the free AoE. And then Raider is just kind of like, I don't know why you would play Raider, but if you really want to have high base movement speed, but no more multiplier, and you like frenzy charges. Anyway, I think I made my point. When you make a Cyclone character for monolith farming, I don't blame you. It's one of the most fun and satisfying skills in the game right now. You just need to not worry about things like damage. You're like, oh, I have less than 1 million Shaper DPS. Oh no, don't worry about it. You're farming Glaciers all day. I don't think the rare mobs are going to notice the difference between 1 million and 100k damage. The downside to Cyclone is if you really want to monolith farm in higher tier maps, you're going to have to invest a lot because you're going to lose damage by investing in AoE and movement speed, and you're going to have to make up that damage in gear. And since everybody and their mother is playing Cyclone right now, the gear that you'll need is going to be ultra expensive, unfortunately. Just focus on getting that AoE, movement speed, and you'll be good to go. You'll be full clearing these monoliths. You're going to be playing one of the most fun skills in the game, and you're going to have a great time. Anyway, moving on, let's talk about the next build. The next one here I have is a little weird. Let's see. Oh, Fireball Magma Orb. So here's another hipster one I have for you today. If you've never played Magma Orb or Fireball, highly recommend both of those skills. They're super fun. They do require a little bit to get going. And by that I mean not so much currency invested, but gem levels, supports, ascendancy choices, things like Snake Pit, things like Fork support, just these like little things that you have to drop into your build to really take them from feeling like a horrible sort of vanilla, like leveling through Act 1 experience up to this crazy endgame mapping thing like what you're seeing behind me. Basically, Fireball is a skill that you want to play with Deadeye. You get +1 chain, you get an extra projectile, you use Dying Sun, you use GMP, and then you're clicking like once, and then the massive AoEs from the Rolling Flame support jewels, Threshold jewels, will be doing shit tons of damage, and they'll just be blowing up everything off screen. I had a lot of fun with this build. This is my version of the build. If you're interested in a build guide for it, it's Pledge of Hands, Trickster, Fireball. Just leave me a comment below. Then we have Magma Orb, which is not a skill that I've played a lot of personally. Just every time I play with it, it never feels as good as I hope it would, but it's still super strong. Here we have footage of this guy playing Deadeye with Sire of Shards and +1 chain. As you can see, all he does is move around in a circle, mash the shit out of it, and these big AoEs of death just come out. Sire of Shards is just a fun item that sort of does that in general, but Magma Orb has crazy AoE, especially when you're spitting it out with these +1 Deadeye chains. So if you're interested in Magma Orb, it won't be a waste of your time, I can promise you that much. You just have to put in a little bit of work before it really gets going. And I think the coolest part of both of these builds is I think their speed levels are actually very, very high compared to some of the other builds on this. Like, I would say for higher tier maps where you aren't necessarily getting as much damage from your Essence Drain and you need to rely on more like high-end scaling, I'd say this one is just barely below Tornado Shot. I mean, both of these builds perform excellently because they have super high damage added effectiveness. So you're going to be hitting super hard, and if you like the skills, there's no reason not to give them a shot. Anyway, guys, I think I'm getting sick. My voice has definitely been giving out in the course of this video. But thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you've been farming monoliths with, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you!
Hey guys, thanks for hanging around to the end of the video. I just wanted to thank my Patreon supporters, Real Human, Pete, Zikrak, Squally, Zoljan, Coda, Julia Allen, Kepler, Fusk, Putzak, Oro Ori, Heiser, 801, Olivier, Ice Dude, Ginsink, and Anonymous. Thank you guys so much. You're making what I do possible. If anyone else is interested in joining the Patreon team, you can check me out at patreon.com/NathanBrotherBob. You can also check me out on Instagram at NathanWalkerYT, and that's my little Discord URL. Discord. Sorry, I'm like almost deaf in my right ear. I can't speak. Discord URL on the bottom right-hand corner. Anyway, thanks again, and I'll see you next week.